Hey, Peter.
Good morning. How you doing?
I'm good. How was your week?
Busy, tons of Zoom meetings. I just started a new free online course on legal technology, and that's going to be running 90 minutes every day on Mondays through Thursdays of next month. So that's going to be like craziness, but
That's that's kind of intense.
really good. Yeah, Hamburg, Germany.
Very good. Hello.
Hey, Megan.
Oh, she's connecting still. Oh, there she is. Now she's connected with audio. It's so clean, so clean in the background where you're sitting, Megan. It looks like you have one of those Zoom backgrounds.
I just don't have that much stuff. I moved in not too long ago, so it's still pretty empty.
Ah, where are you? Where's the apartment?
I live in Toronto.
Well, and that's where my questioning stops. I know nothing about Toronto at all. But yeah, that sounds good.
There's not too much. Huh? Sorry?
It's funny. I was in a Zoom call not long ago, and the person had this absolutely beautiful, magnificent office. And of course, it turns out it was really like ray traced, photorealistic, absolutely amazing, until he rotated his chair slightly and the green screen fell. And he's in a laundry room.
Really? I'm just looking at the map now. I have been to Canada once, and I cannot remember where it was.
I live on the east coast of the country.
Right.
So she's up north of New York.
Everything is north of New York, you know. New York is quite far south. Oh, there's Toronto right there. Yeah, I see that. That's okay. Actually, you know, I had, oh God, the call's being recorded, but anyway, I'll say it. I had no idea Toronto was that near. So that's just on the other side of Niagara Falls.
Yeah. I grew up basically going to Niagara Falls like 10 times a year.
So are you Canadian or American?
I'm Canadian.
Okay, because I went to Syracuse as Peter did. So well, that's not so far away.
Yeah.
Oh my God, there's a place called London just to the west. And even more amazing, there's a place near Toronto called Hamilton.
Yeah. So one of the most well-known, I guess, medical schools in Canada is at Hamilton. And London has it's basically a small university town. There's a university there called the University of Western Ontario.
Oh, I heard of that.
So that's where it is. I don't think there's that much more that colors that city, but
I think Hamilton's probably more interesting. I'm a bit obsessed with the musical. Earlier today on Twitter, Lin-Manuel Miranda's dad was talking about something, so we got into a Twitter discussion. So that is my claim to fame for my entire life. So when I see Hamilton, I go a bit crazy. Ask the rest of the guys here know. And I believe, Peter, who of you have seen Hamilton? It's a very important and relevant question.
I haven't seen it yet, but it's on my list since for the past 4 meetings, you haven't stopped talking about it. So I have to watch it.
I think it should just be Megan and me for the rest of the call, really, because we have a different language now. Yeah, I mean,
I was lucky enough that, oh, sorry.
You saw it in New York live?
No. I actually saw it in London.
Oh, you did? Wow, that's even more annoying. What do you think?
I have family in London, and my cousin was really, really obsessed. So he won the lottery at some point, and we got fantastic seats to see it.
Wow. Yeah.
Well, I saw Phantom in London. Does that count?
No. No. That's not a comparison. But I had a very pleasant chat with the jury earlier today. And one of the things we talked about, he was talking about hypothesis, but that's neither here nor there. He was talking about how the URL, the web link, is the API. Is that how you phrased it, Jerry?
Yes.
I just
Yes.
thought that's a very interesting way of looking at things. Maybe we should talk about that. But just for the rest of you, the reason why Hamilton is so incredibly obsessively good is really worth mentioning to this community again. I mean, yes, he's clearly a combination of Mozart and Shakespeare in terms of the artistic presentation, but it really is about writing a culture, a society, a country, and a system into existence. It really is the most incredible emotional presentation of what the work we do. You know, in the very, very first song, he put a pencil to his temple and connected it to his brain. I mean, how can you not start crying, right? Every problem he had, he wrote his way out. You know, so we should really talk about the, you know, the network issues and all of that stuff, but let's not forget why we're doing it. We're doing it so people can think better, right? So anyway, that was just that. Also, there's a fantastic video on YouTube of a bunch of Chinese people doing Hamilton. Clearly mainland, clearly English is not a language they've ever spoken. Clearly the passion is amazing. You have to find it and watch it because it is so moving to see how things move into different cultures. It's amazing. Can someone please interrupt me before I go into another aspect of this?
No, we know better than to get between you and Hamilton.
You know me well, Peter. Talking of coming between, I'm starting a course on Sunday, and Raphael is joining me, it looks like, which I really hope. It's a 6-week or something course every Sunday on writing the future of text. Presentation, discussion, doing a graph view of the future of text, and everybody writes an essay that goes into a journal. And at the end, the final journal entry goes into the book. So if any of you guys want to join, that would be very cool because you're clearly that kind of people.
On next Saturday, I'm going to be doing a salon as well on the interintellect community. It's going to be about search, pretty much. And I would love to hear other people's thoughts on search, but it's going to be search not just on the digital environment. Like, how do people look for information and find information, and what are the different ways they go about it, what's their thought process and things like that. So it's going to be a pretty cool discussion. I'll throw the link in the chat if any of you.
Yes. Rafa, did you say interintellect?
Yes.
Oh, I love them. Yes.
Yeah,
unfortunately, I spent 2 hours trying to fill in their application form, but I ran out of time and didn't complete only 3/4 way through. So
yes, I've been going to a bunch of salons. They're a very nice community of very smart people.
That sounds brilliant. So are you asking us to attend then, or are you asking for a discussion on search now? What's the thing you think?
Well, I guess we could, I don't know, actually. I think we should keep the discussion on the book because it's more time, precious time.
I just said, Raphael, I would like to attend. Could you send me the link? Is that link would allow me to attend it?
Yes, this is the link. There is an area for coupon discounts, but I don't have it yet. I have to get in touch with Ben, who's one of the organizers, and I have to ask him for it. But
can you send me, give you my mail, so could you send me whatever is needed for that?
Yes.
So I can actually join, even though I haven't joined interintellect, because I failed. Yeah.
So how do we sign up for this? Oh, memberships. Yep. Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
it's pretty straightforward because it is a kind of I don't want to say closed community. It's like Nest Labs. You have to pay to be a part of it, and then after you're part of it, you can do these salons, and then you can charge for these salons, and then the people who are hosts can go to other salons for free. So it's I haven't understood completely like the monetizing part, but I mean, just being part of the salons has been a great way to talk about different topics.
Rafael, did you manage to fill in the application form, or how did you get into that?
Yes, I sent them an email, and then after that, they invited me to Discord, and then I joined the membership, so I paid the annual fee. And then, you know, I interacted with them in the community, and then now this is my first salon, and then I'll be doing others, all related to information, text, search, web, and things like that. But it's a nice community to pay attention to.
So this the notion of salon, is that a one-off event or is it a series of events? Like, is it a course or a one-off?
So they have series as well. The salons are a one-of. But let's say, for example, there's some book clubs. So if you want to have a book club on the future of text book, you can have it as an ongoing discussion. And then every week or every 2 weeks, you know, you host a discussion topic on some specific pages of the book. The format is pretty free, but the thing is that it has to be long discussions. So salons are usually from 2 to 4 hours. Usually they're 3 hours long. So they're quite a time investment. But people go and they interact and they ask questions and they stay like the whole time. And it's very curious people. I've been having a lot of fun with these discussions.
Well, Frode, we are doing a salon like this here ourselves, you know.
Yes.
that's
Office hours
exactly
is kind of
what
like
it
a
is.
salon on text.
I've just unlocked my free coupon. I've signed up for this thing. Apply coupon.
Cool.
Hang on.
I think I'm gonna do a book club on The Information by James Gleick to read it with other people. I think this is gonna be a nice topic because it goes over so many different periods and people and theories that I feel like it's gonna be a great discussion.
I have that volume.
Huh?
I have that volume.
Oh, The Information. Yeah, good book.
Yeah, this one, yeah, good book.
What is that book?
It's called The Information by James Gleick. I can send you a link for
Yes,
Amazon.
please. Yes, please.
You don't need a link. It literally is just The Information. It's very cool.
A History, a Theory, a Flood.
So there is something here in the UK. Well, actually, I don't know where they are, but they do also a membership, and then you can attend events at a discounted rate. And they always tend to be a little bit messy with the billing because they often use Eventbrite for the event, but then there's the membership separate, and then they don't share information between each other. But this seemed to have gone quite well. So yeah, I'm in. I'm going to be watching information curation from the Library of Alexandria to the World Wide Web.
I hope I don't disappoint. But it's less, I'm more used to
I'll be the one in the
like,
back throwing the popcorn.
Yeah. Boo. But the format is quite different to what I'm used to because it's like they're simulating physical space. Like when you meet people in a physical space and you have these conversations, that's what they're doing. And the format I'm mostly used to is the regular, you know, you do a presentation and then people have, you know, conversation after the presentation. So it's going to be a learning opportunity for me because it's a different format. So I'm still trying to figure out the best part.
That is very interesting. So,
but you should totally host, Frode.
yeah, I mean, we'll see. I did it's very strange because part of what Jerry and I were doing earlier today was commiserating over how incredibly difficult it is to A, build a community, and B, make money in this world. You know, I've been doing this software for a while, and we're finally, over the last few months, at a level where a student can really use it and export and hand in a piece of work. But the marketing is very expensive, and the App Store, Apple's App Store, is absolute shit. You know, they're being sued right, left, and center for being a monopoly, and yet they do nothing to make it a nice, bizarre kind of market. You know, when you go on the macOS App Store into the education section, you have 3 or 4 recommended items that their friends have made, and then a top 10 list. That's it. There is no subsection for university. There is no subsection for different fields. There are no places you can view by, let's say, unknown gems, like it's got over so and so many stars and it's been on the App Store for 2 years at least, so you know it's a real company. None of that.
Yeah.
Absolutely infuriating. So we have to build this community through the kind of things you'll be presenting on and so on ourselves.
Yes.
Yeah.
The last salon I went to yesterday, I talked about the future of text, both the symposium and the book, and there were like 4 different people that commented that they read the book already. So
Well, that's
this
good.
is the same kind of community. So I was very happy to find out that people were excited about the book.
Yeah, that's very nice to hear, because that is obviously the hope, to have some random person none of us have ever come across before and get inspired and do something truly useful. So that's
Yeah. But it takes time to build a community.
Yeah, it really does. So
Well,
Megan,
we're off to a good start.
have you graduated or are you studying? You seem so mature but young, so I'm a bit confused. If you can just remind me where you are.
Me?
Oh, no, Megan,
I
who is
Megan.
to your left
I
on my Zoom screen. Sorry.
I am in the final stretch of my PhD.
Yep.
So the reason why I've been sort of swamped and could
said-
only drop
sorry.
by.
I have to apologize for saying graduated. I'm on a PhD too, and I know it sounds really stupid. Please go on. It's not what I meant to say.
Oh,
Anyway,
no,
yes.
it's like, I'm in sort of the final stretch. So as I was mentioning, I've been a little swamped lately because I have a full draft kind of submission deadline for mid-May to give my supervisors a look before I submit the written. So in August. So this is just kind of I guess what are they called? A kind of green light, or, to see whether or not, this is something that's on track for submission. So I'm sorry I haven't been able to attend as regularly as I had hoped. But yeah, I'm just a little kind of under the water at the moment.
Well, I'm looking forward to reading a copy as soon as you have a draft for outside eyes.
You're working
Yeah.
on language in law, right?
Yes, but sort of in light of the digital encounters. So I'm trying to understand, are the kind of limits of law the limits of text? So yeah, and I'm looking at whether or not the law is housed in natural language and what happens if we change the medium.
So, oh God, sorry, it just keeps coming back to the same thing. But I mean, when you look at something like the founding of that country south of you, America, you look at things like the Federalist Papers and all this stuff, that was written pen and ink, till their fingers were bleeding. Have you done any kind of work into how politics, actual politics, I'm not talking about social media talking about politics, but politics is done now compared to then, or anything like that?
No, my focus is actually just on, I guess, what you would say is modern law, and the 3 sort of primary pillars of legal text. So contracts, case law, and legislation statutes. So I kind of look at what happens when you translate law that's written in natural language into another medium, like a formal programming language and that type.
It is very interesting.
I hope so.
Yeah, I mean, partly because humans, of course, are not purely logical creatures, which is why, there are both positives and negatives. But I would like to think that if you cannot codify a law into programmatic code, it still has a human value. But maybe that's something we're going away from because things have to link up.
So there's interesting kind of thoughts on this. many people think that the law is already rather formalistic, that it's in a way sort of if-then statements or, kind of written in a declarative logic. I am quite interested in from the perspective of linguistics. So I look at actually how sentence structure, or not only syntax, but semantics and pragmatics, various subfields within linguistics, how they play a role actually in providing context in the law, because context plays a very, very, very big role. So that's a little bit kind of more of the shape in how I'm trying to write my thesis. But yeah.
Fascinating. Hi, Alan. I saw you could join us.
Welcome aboard, Alan.
Yeah, thanks. Glad to be here. And Megan, that sounds amazing. I only heard the last little bit of it, but it is funny how the problems show, the problems that we discuss here and wrestle with show up in a lot of different venues, and it sounds like you're working with one of those for sure. It sounds similar to what I deal with.
Oh, you need to elaborate.
I was just going to ask.
Well, so, okay. My context is I work at a tech company that, unlike a tech company that, has made a new product or a new bit of software in the system, I think this is sort of understated. The problem that it solved is to connect the dots between previously existing systems. So in this case, it would be primarily telecom, but perhaps, stretching over to intelligence, data analysis, and communication and traversal logistics, things like that. So the range of things that we need to know or be able to discuss is all over the place and in all different languages. And so today, for instance, it came up. It's good that people are starting to realize this more. The problem came up as like the tools that we use commonly are background noise there. They're not sufficient to just dictate the entity that's involved, the subject, the way that we might create entities or tags or whatnot. That is almost without value. There needs to be kind of and I wonder if this happens in law. This is where I was thinking, if there were different tools at a very basic level, like a complex tag, would it be easier to inject nuance, aspect, these other parts of language that, how do I put this? I wonder if what you're experiencing as a legal language gets programmatized, if nuance is stripped away because the programmatic language simply isn't sufficient.
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, exactly what I'm looking into. A lot of what I'm noticing is that there's a kind of dwelling or focus on computational linguistics as a way of almost translating the law. A lot of NLP uses kind of these basics around computational linguistics. And my kind of, I guess, proposition is more that we have to return to the roots of linguistics, more look into kind of core linguistics and core linguistic practices to kind of learn from these lessons in order to actually reconcile using computational methods in translating from legal language that's housed in a natural language vessel into a kind of programmatic language. And so I think there's obviously misconceptions. A lot of lawyers have this idea that you can't, I think when they think of computation, they instantly sometimes think of automating the law or that kind of nature. I think that when there's a sort of need to change the frame of how people understand what computation is and how to kind of shift and understand how to use computational methods in kind of writing the law. So that's a little bit what I'm focused on right now.
That's great. It reminds me, I heard a conversation recently, and there's been some conversation about the blockchaining facts or blockchaining, knowledge in relation to fake news and whatnot. And I hear that from my sympathies, and I don't see how it's possible. I wonder if the same sort of, given that law is, at least to some people, closer to logic, right? But of course, underneath it all, it's there's history. Do you ever see, if someone talks about there should be a blockchain for laws and for law documentation, does that sound as ridiculous as it? Sorry, that's framing it. Does that sound like problematic or potential solution?
So I don't know that much about blockchain. My understanding of it is limited to the extent that it seems to me more of a storage system as opposed to a method of communicating the law. What people have mentioned, especially in the context of smart contracts, is that they're trying to understand how do you do smart contracts that use kind of blockchain technology, and how do you wrap prose around it. And this is something that Peter actually knows him, but Jim Hazard is looking into with his idea with prose objects. For me, I think that my focus has been on drafting and how do you write, and what does that necessarily mean. So I focus less on kind of the almost the repository of legal text. I'm looking more into we've been crafting kind of the law using language, and there's been an obsession. When people think about the law, they consider it as a very precise language. So I'm trying to understand, what is this obsession with precision? Is the law actually precise? And if so, how do we actually find a new medium that is compatible with the digital world, or this obsession of bringing the law to the 21st century, or even the end of the 20th century, and trying to understand sort of how do you reconcile precision with actually not losing any of that legal content or legal substance that makes the kind of system work. So I don't know if that was very clear.
Oh, that's great. That does clear up. Thank you.
Yeah, mainly what blockchain does is gives you a undeniable ledger and proof that something happened at a given point in time.
Right.
You really could just substitute that with a trusted corporate authority that had some archival guarantees that it was going to be around for a while. So all the blockchain's really doing is letting you have that in a distributed fashion instead of having to rely on a central authority to keep the record. It's really massively overhyped. It has its uses, but I mean, mainly all it's good for is I'll take an cryptographic hash of some large data object, and I'll throw the cryptographic hash in the blockchain, and then I can show later on that this data produces that hash. We know that that hash was established at a point in time. So in that sense, I can then prove that I wrote this at a given date.
Yeah.
Jump
Jerry.
in.
Jerry.
Yeah, sorry, I'm triggered on two fronts now. So I put it in the chat. This is something a friend of mine was writing about, and it just blew my mind, because basically, certainly the English common law had this idea that the law is there to discover what is just. That's the whole point. Now, as soon as you formalize it, you kill the discovery and you kill the law, at least the way I understand it. So bear that in mind, whatever you do. The other thing is that the blockchain, I've been tweeting about it 100 times. People, the whole field is basically, very few people understand. There is the blockchain. Okay, there's the cryptographic hash. And with the blockchain, blockchain is all about trustless systems, permissionless systems. At least Bitcoin pioneered this idea. And the idea there is that blockchain, like Bitcoin, gives you absolute time and absolute consensus. Now, we as humans, that's the last thing we want. The only system that needs it is somebody who wants us to control us centrally. That's when they need the absolute time.
Yeah.
We as human beings, we're living in an attention space, which is sacred. And it is all we care about is eventual consistency. So there's the decentralized ledger technology, which is the blockchain, Bitcoin, that stuff. And there's the alternative. Both of them are interplanetary file system, the decentralized hash table. And the whole point of the decentralized hash table, that it's a global giant graph, if you like. And the only thing that you care about is which is within your purview, that is adjacent to you. And as soon as, of course, there's another community out there and you're aware of them, then these are joining up in a natural way. And then they can be eventually consistent. There is no need, no possibility of eventual consistency. The universe is, of absolute consistency.
When
The
you talk
universe
about,
is eventually consistent.
when you talk about consistency, it brings up.
What I mean that everybody knows that that penny has been spent. That's what I mean. Everybody knows that you can. They created that monster just to be able to guarantee that the same money hasn't been spent twice. But you do not need a global time and global consistency, because in the network where it actually the exchange happens, as far as the network is alive at any given time, you should be able. This is the whole point of the decentralized hash table technology, is that it's built on trust, because the parties connect because they trust each other. And if they don't the parties don't trust each other, they don't connect. So you don't need a trustless. In fact, what you need to do is empower the trust. So you know that you can verify. That's the whole point, as Peter said, the whole point of that is that you can verify that something
too far
has happened.
down the blockchain rabbit hole here, but yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, also the other thing that is kind of important when it comes to the law is how it's changed over the last year, because I think we're all living in similar situations where most people have been breaking the law over the last year in a small or a big way. And so the human aspect of what we here in the UK call community policing has really come to the fore. You see how, what's the police going to do in terms of when we had lockdown? Right? So many people are breaking the law. They have to decide blatantly, and we all know this from cop shows and superficial things like that. You take out the baddest bad guys. But now when you see people doing it all the time, suddenly it becomes a human social thing. It is not a you steal a bike, you go to jail type situation. I wonder if that's shaking up the thinking around this thing about the rigor and logic of law.
So one thing that is not really within my thesis, but I've been interested in, is this idea of historical linguistics and how that's been a study of sort of how the kind of outward symbol or sign of the word has stayed the same, but the meaning has changed over time, and kind of looking at almost like a static and dynamic perspective of how words come to get their meaning. So I've been interested in actually how that plays a role in legal language, just because a lot of the words, if you look into some of the legal language that's used very frequently, it's rather old Middle English at times. And it was considered as common speech in that time, but it's come to become something more formalized. And so when it comes to kind of that formal logic, especially one of the words like whereas, it's something that appears a lot in legal documents, but it's actually has variations and several variants in meaning. So to me, I think it's fascinating. Kind of if you look at evolution, is it sort of heading towards a direction where it enables duality and more strains of meaning, or is it that it's trying with time, it does the opposite where it increases precision? So it's not quite on exactly what Freud was mentioning, but it's just something that kind of popped up.
Wow, you know what just popped into my head?
No.
Version of Reader specifically for legal documents that would have it pre-populated with meanings and explanations of different language constructs, not just at the individual word level, but at the stock phrase level. So it recognize patterns that might have a couple filler gaps in them, and then provide you with an explanation of how these words are interpreted so that a layperson could look at the document and have some support from the system as to how to wrap his head around what he was reading.
I think obviously in author and reader, that's never going to happen in terms of pre-populated. But I think obviously where you're going with this is very good and important. But it has to be through interaction and navigation. Otherwise, you get so much clutter instantly. But if you can have something as simple as, this document was written in 1960. And therefore, it does a basic, there are some words that have been flagged to have changed since then.
Yes, perfect, brilliant, yes.
But that has to be a human group that I guess goes through and says they actually have changed. So we have different levels of applying stuff. Raphael, I have a feeling you're.
Yeah. I hate documents, like legal documents, because the language is so complicated.
I was about to kick you from the group, but okay.
So the way we did it in our company with the legal department is that we had a lot of conversations with the team present so that they could also understand all of the intricacies, but we also went through a process of simplifying the language. And law in Brazil is a little different than law in the US or Canada. I think there's a lot of room to, I think it's something related to, it's not as precise as you were mentioning, like the perfect law, the perfect description of how it would fit in like a specific package. And it's more either subjective or conversational, like context-based. So they discuss a lot of what happened in order to come to a conclusion. It's not as black and white as it is in the US when it comes to law. So we went through that process and it was really nice. And the contract came very well laid out, and the language is very understandable for the team as well. But it's something that I'm learning a lot.
It's fascinating that you say that, because there's obviously a lot of discussion and conversation on that, on this notion of simplification and movement and from legal language or legalese into plain language or ordinary speech. It's especially fascinating because actually one of the big seminal texts on this is called The Language of the Law by David Mellenkopf, who in the 60s already said, let's do away with all of these kind of silly notions that we have in the law using Old English and whatnot. I think what's really interesting though, is whether or not it's just the kind of vessel that we need to think about, or whether or not kind of there's an intimate marriage between the way that legal concepts are expressed, and just this idea of, is it simply that it's complex because the wording is weird, or is it that if you already have that knowledge, that even if it is complex, you already understand it. So even simplifying it or using kind of plain language, it doesn't actually resolve the kind of inherent. So there's a kind of duality and complexity. Is it complexity from the language and use of language, or is it complexity of the concept? And one of the kind of interesting counter arguments that people had against the legal language was a linguist actually named Brenda Dannett, who was saying how actually if people were to kind of clarify the concept in itself, then the complexity of a language doesn't do much, and people actually get used to the lingo over time. So I think what's really fascinating is it's maybe that the law is complex in a sense that it's inexpressible almost, or there is so much that is so context driven that even if you simplify the language over time, that it's not kind of creating that effect of making it clear. So I think why, and so if I were to be a devil's advocate here, I wonder if maybe it's the fact that you had that multidisciplinary sitting down with the legal team and having those concepts clarified, which made it easier for you to understand those contracts and the complex language, as opposed to kind of the plain language process of actually translating from legalese to plain English. But that's also one of the kind of investigations I'm thinking about.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, all of this comes down to who you represent, right? If you represent the state, you have a very different idea of what the law text should be than if you represent a company. And if you represent a poor person, you have yet another perspective, because it's not that hard to I can't even say the word, make something difficult to read. And in many cases, obviously, that's very, very important. So when it comes to simplifying and clarifying, there's of course always a cost to that. The question is who benefits? And in many cases, that becomes the issue in itself, which means that the inertia in the system to keep it the way it is, which obviously benefits insiders, because it's insiders who run the system, will have very small reason to open it up. You know, it's like literally opening up the gates. It's like, oh my God, if you understand what we're doing, they may argue with us and they may win the argument.
Yeah. It was once kind of described, the legal language, as a moat,
Exactly.
or understanding the language is a sort of entry into a priesthood in a way. Yeah. So yeah, I think, yeah, there's a number of scholars that's been writing about kind of the priesthood of the law and how language has acted as this moat, this shield against everyone else. And I think actually the benefits of technology and kind of being able to rethink and use a different medium is that it is lowering the access in many ways to the language and in effect the law. So yeah, it's all great points.
Sorry, Jerry, I see you have your hand, but this is such an explosive point. I would say that all groups have their own jargon, not a controversial thing to say. And how the jargon works varies. Like, you know, a street gang can have very few words, but the way you say them and the way your face looks can be crucial to whether you get shot or not. So therefore, it seems to me again and again in our text discussions that what we need to really, really strongly support is the interaction, which is quite a few things in the subtext you've been talking on, where if you come from one place and you're approaching something else, I don't think you can necessarily have a mapping between two things easily always, but to allow you to constantly interact with it, like almost anything you want to be good at, whether it's chopping down trees or the law, you got to do it again. You're going to interact with the thing. You know, I have my beautiful, almost 4-year-old boy. Walking home from nursery with him takes an hour because he has to touch everything, he has to jump on everything because he's learning the affordances of everything. You know, and if we just rush him past, he will know nothing of that. Same thing with the affordances of different languages, right? In this sense, maybe.
Got a comment on that quickly. Just the bit about the moat and the priesthood, I definitely identify with and agree that it is in all sectors. In fact, there's even a parasite of that, or an additional layer of that, where within that group, perhaps even rather common terms have very specific meanings. And once that word, you know, gets out, chaos occurs because people take this once specific technical meaning to be common. And what I think about this is, well, in blockchain, it'd be ledger for truth. They mean something very specific, right? It gets out and people think it's a totally different thing. Same thing with Claude Shannon and information theory with signal and noise. It meant a very specific way to send something across a wire, but it's taken to mean meaning. And anyway, so really fascinating. I'd love at some point, unless you've already covered it, but you had some questions about, or you were seeking opinions on reader and the graph view. I'd love to chat about that at some point.
I would love to. I think actually now might be relevant because I think other than Megan, I think you've all seen it. And Actually, is it too rude if we just do a quick walkthrough? Okay, thank you. Jerry, you had something to say before I do that. Can you please do that?
Just very quickly, the number one thing is there is a deliberate, huge amount of obfuscation. I mean, and of course, there is also the complexity of the thing. I never done this before, but this time I read my house insurance, 64 pages, small print. And the situation is complex. They basically wrote in everything that I could possibly think of that would cause my house to burn down. And they stated it, oh, if that happened, oh, what, that was a cigarette? Sorry, you won't get your house. So there's the complexity of the situation and the deliberate obfuscation, trusting you that you will never read. And when it happens, yeah, I mean, I learned this lesson because we had, I would say, please give me everything you got cover on. And they didn't. And when there was a leak on the roof, I didn't get compensated. So that had to be just one other thing. And of course, you said, yes, words change their meaning. And my favorite classic example is the word pathetic, which meant originally full of pathos, and know what it means today.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so I don't waste your time. There are hundreds of those, and if you once you see one, you see it everywhere.
Over. Absolutely. So thank you, Jerry. So this thing with knowledge graphs, I'll do a screen share for a couple of screenshots. Almost all of this works except for the last two bits. And so Megan, you're the new one here. So if you have any questions, because I think the rest of the guys have seen it in various guises. There are two problems with knowledge graphs that I'm looking at here. One of them is normally when you do a knowledge graph, and by knowledge graph, I mean it could literally be yellow Post-its on a wall. It could be any incarnation of that. It helps you think, you get a picture of how things connect and so on. But at the end of the day, you hand in a piece of work and it's gone. You may have a screenshot, but it's kind of gone. The second part is how things connect. And the example I use here, I'm not kidding, is the sentence, Alex loves the musical Hamilton, right? That's really easy to do on a graph because you have Alex, the musical Hamilton, and loves is the connection, right? But what about the other way around? This is the classic problem. The musical Hamilton doesn't even know who this Alex is. So very often you start having arrows and you have all kinds of stuff and it gets cluttered, right? That's an issue. And what I feel is an important thing, I'm about to show you some I'll just show you screenshots now. An important perspective to this is what Alan and I've been twittering about, is if something is important to you while you're learning for whatever reason, you may spend the time to write the definition of it in a notebook or wherever. That's really, really important in this context, because if you just put a bunch of stuff into a hat, you just get a very heavy hat. You don't get knowledge. Knowledge comes from you thinking and you defining. So picture this in the dynamic view in Author, which is just to put text anywhere, move it around anywhere. Anything that has a definition is bold. To give something a definition, you just select it, do Command G, and you type in normal English, and you can give it a tag if you want, you can give it a website, whatever. Key is when you write it in, it feels like normal English. It isn't code, it isn't hard brackets or anything like that. In this example, we wrote, Doug invented a system called Augment, along with other things. You click OK, and now Doug Engelbart, the text that we selected here to write the term for, is bold, because it is now a glossary term. Glossary term is not a very sexy thing, so I'm trying not to say that, but that is what it is. So here's the cool thing. If you now were to click on Doug Engelbart, a line would automatically go to Augment, because Augment is in the definition. And Augment is, as you can see, because it's bold, another glossary term. So that is most of the system. It's just helping remind you that this thing, Doug, refers to this thing, Augment. If you now click on that line, it gives you the sentence that created that connection. So in this view, that's the whole package. Except if you click on Augment, it'll give you a different sentence, because it's the sentence and augment linking to Doug, or nothing if it didn't link back. And also, because this is about building something in your brain, if this is not a very good sentence, you just do Command G and you refine how it's written. It's about helping you do that refining of the sculpture. And I said there were two problems. One problem is that the work doesn't go anywhere. But what happens here is you export it to a normal document. And when you do that in in Reader, I think most of you know this, if you select any text and do Command F, you see all the occurrences of that text just instantly changed. So here's a term, visual meta, that happens to be in the glossary. Sorry, I clicked the wrong place. It now shows the glossary definition on top. So that's kind of cool, right? But the key, and this is the final bit of the puzzle, I don't know if you can see it on your screen, but author and reader are also bold. I click on reader, it loads the definition of reader. Author, you see? So this is the same graph space.
But I have a question. When you clicked on reader, there was a word called readership. If I don't want that to be part of that filter, can I remove certain words from that filter? Do you think that's going to be a possibility?
I don't know. I think that's a very interesting issue. Another one, you may see it come up. You see it instantly, see
Yeah.
the I is actually bold. That's because I've defined me, I. Right? Because if someone's reading the document, they don't know who the author is. Come across I or me or my name, you can click on this and you get who it is, right? This glossary stays with you for as long as you want. So I think that should be filtered out, but to allow you to do that, probably, but it cannot be a primary thing. I'd much rather that this becomes an easy workflow rather than it becomes something that you need to be, to put it this term, kind of anal about, to really go about and fix, because I don't think a lot of people would use it then. So
Would you just automatically include the trailing space after the term? It would look for reader space instead of looking for reader and then picking up readership?
Yeah, I think we will try to do rules like that, Peter, but I'm just being a bit funny with Raphael saying, I'd rather have it be allowing you to, oh, maybe that didn't match, and then go somewhere else, than have it to be too much upfront. Hi, Mark.
Or you could stem it for an even wider match.
Yeah, I think, yeah, makes sense. Just the key is it should be very casual. You're reading someone's document at the top of the screen, you click about, you see how things are connected. Maybe something doesn't make sense, fine, you click somewhere else. So yeah, we should implement exactly the things you're saying, but I don't want it to be overly clever. I want you to think, not some kind of AI script.
So question for you, Frode, and this is actually has less to do with our heady conversations, so maybe it'll be a welcome break. It's more just on the UX philosophy kind of side. I love that the apps are minimal, but in the case that you just showed, there's a condition of where I feel like I have lost my place, right? If I click reader and I see the glossary and then I see the instances, yes, I can hit a keyboard command and go back to the text I was reading. But if I click on another link that was presented in the glossary, now I am at that new page, and I feel like I've lost my old position. So I get why, from a minimalist point of view, you'd want separate screens to say, like, this is what you're focusing on now. You're not reading text now. But the trade-off, I feel like, or at least something to address, is, do you feel that people get lost?
I think you bring up a completely valid point, because normally you do Command F, you see this view, do Command F again, your fingers are still on the keyboard, it's not a problem. But now that we have this bit at the top, I can see that that's a fair point. I do not like buttons, but I can see this is a case where maybe a done button would be fine. I don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
Done meaning
okay.
To the normal view of the document.
And the same would apply, I think, to author, where you're defining a new term, or you're getting into that graph view, that graph view is above, or it's a separate view than the text. Is that correct?
I'm a little lost, but Mark,
When you had the example of Douglas Engelbart and augment,
yeah.
where in the app is that?
Oh, that's in the dynamic view. And
Right.
I'll do a quick screen share to make sure we're on the same page. So here we are, fresh new document. We write Doug. And I can now click at the bottom of the screen to go dynamic view. That's just from earlier. Type words, whatever. I can also go Command D to toggle between them for dynamic view. If I select Doug Engelbart and do Command D, it copies it across. So yes.
Gotcha. So that would be an example of the same minimal UX, because it's a separate screen, so you can focus. But there could also be a trade-off of I don't know where I'm at, or even, and that isn't actually solved as quickly as just a keyboard toggle, because it's a deeper heuristic to say, am I taking a risk whenever we jump to a new link, you know, and it replaces the link that we're at on in a browser? We have a kind of a friction that occurs because there's part of us that wants to stay where we're at and not fully commit.
Yeah, I mean, this is, I had this argument with Stephen Fry of all people, and he's the one who insisted at the bottom of the screen, at least, we should have this toggle. So if you don't know the keyboard shortcut, this is the only way to get in and out. So the one interface element on the screen is the one that will take you out of it. Clicking here, dynamic view / word processing view.
But I mean, these are all, it's the same information underneath presented in a different way. I mean, I know Peter will be familiar from Tinderbox that has, I don't know, about 8 different views built into it. It's all the same data. It's just visualized in a different manner.
Yeah.
And there's a canonical, there will be presumably a canonical probably outline underneath it all, because it's got to be stored somewhere. And the others are just abstractions. And the joy is it's all the same data. So it gets you out of the sort of, there's a current vogue at the moment that if you throw enough things and enough links in a large enough bucket, that insight will come from it. And I'm not entirely, you know, I get that, which is not against the linkage. It's more against the assumption that the insight comes from basically just putting everything in one thing. Often it's being able to view the same thing in a different visualization form.
I just wanted to illustrate what you said there, Mark, by doing this. If I double click on Doug Engelbart, it does the same as doing a Command F search. So now I see in this test document, there's only one, but that's why it says that as exit at the bottom.
So I get Alan's point. I mean, I think one of the things that's good about this is it's actually shifting us out of the rut of basically having one presentation thing, be it, you know, linear text in Word or just the web page that happens to be in front of us in a web browser. Because this isn't to sort of negate the value of the network and the sort of things that Jerry are doing, really, really interesting. But to a certain extent, we've certainly acclimatized ourselves to sort of having things in one linear form in front of us, and actually being able to chop to different visualizations of the same data,
Right.
Is really powerful, and it's a shame not to see it done more.
That's thanks for saying that. And I, by the way, totally agree with you with the bucket. The in vogue bucket is pretty awful, like 90s graphic design bad. But yeah, I think it's certainly not MVP or anything, but if you well, I guess because it's in Swift, it would be interesting if you could say like, hey, I actually want the graph view to be up while I'm writing, and I want it to be another tab. Maybe you don't, but maybe you do want it to be another tab. But then I know you're shaking your head no.
Almost hurts. I'm shaking it that hard.
I know. But here's the thing. Here's where it gets maybe even worse. What I would personally love in a multimodal world is to have like my editor with my typewriter here, my keyboard rather, and then have a graph view on my iPad, right? So it's actually two different devices where one, I might be using my finger to drag things around or click on or find out more, but that's not getting in the way of this device. And that sort of thing could be possible. But.
Right, so just to definitively answer that.
Yeah.
The design perspective it comes from is the following. Number one, information within eyes reach and commands within hands reach, hence keyboard shortcut and stuff. Keep it simple, don't clutter the screen with crap. Also, I think of it in the sense of a sculpture. So when you fold the document, you do a find, you know, you're doing, my brother, he's a theater actor and director, he talks like this, right? And I get that, that's how we think. But we don't use our arms, but you know, we want to collapse it, do this, move it around.
Yeah.
This is what we're doing. I'm wary of having different shapes of the same thing, even though I know that's what Doug Engelbart loved. I know it's, you know, people with bigger brains than me, that's what they love, I get it. However, having it on a different device, it becomes something else. So if we ever manage to develop an iPad version and have them somehow connected to do what you're talking about, I think that will be useful because that doesn't interfere with your work view, think view here by doing stuff. It's a here and here. Yeah,
and that's, I was mainly trying to, get a sense of where your philosophy was coming from on that. So I appreciate that. It doesn't matter much, but on the iPad thing, that would actually probably be possible today because even with your app that's currently open on my computer, I could send it to my iPad. I don't have to have an app for it. I could just send it over. So in that sense, I could be sending over a tab, right? Now, I don't think I can control it with my fingertips on the screen, but
these are just matters of implementation.
Yeah. Okay, that gives me some more information there. That's good to know. And I didn't see the navigation on the bottom. That's helpful.
Well, it's helpful for me to learn that you didn't see it because you're clearly a clever guy. So if there's a UI element you missed, there is an issue.
I think it had more to do with Zoom in this case.
Oh, yeah, that's fair enough. And I mean, we are trying to do, you know, when you go to the website, it's not so much salesy as trainee. You know, here's a feature, it works like this, it's connected to this, but you need to know this. So, you know, I'm having a huge argument with my close friend who's helping me with PR and marketing, who wants it to be more visual, more visuals. Like,
right.
Yes.
More fonts, different colors.
Anyway,
I love the minimalism, the sort of the tufty CSS kind of look to it. I would be curious if there is a middle ground, not middle ground, that's the wrong word, but if there was like, if you had created Doug Engelbart as an entity that lives in the graph, and while you're reading, you hover over the word, if its graph instance would, you know, like appear over to the right as if it was a side note, you know, with perhaps whatever its closest relatives are, and then it's gone the minute you hover off of it.
yeah, I mean,
passive discovery.
I think that's where it is heading. And let's not forget, in relation to the previous discussion, every piece of software is a language. So you do get to know the jargons over time. And of course, it is expensive to learn if it is different from what you're used to.
Right.
That's why we do Command F for find and Command G for glossary. We try to make it as connected to normal as possible. But for what you're saying now, number one, if you even currently select Doug Engelbart again, do Command G, get the same definition instantly in a dialog box. And it says all the definition stuff, meaning all the connections. To go from there and to have a easily accessible way to, in the body of the text, select Doug Engelbart and then see the connections, it will be the same information as what we have now, but to do it in a more visually clear way. Maybe even editing, you have split screen, something like that would be very interesting, yeah.
I think also I'm conscious that, you know, as Fred says, it's sort of difficult and expensive to put stuff in, but, you know, with the scope he's got for student writing, the kind of more expansive thing that you've mentioned, and which I'm so quite used to using in other tools, is great. And I think as Fred said, that it seems a natural progression. But actually, whether an undergraduate's going to be sort of probably using that complex a background structure, I wonder. I hope so in the future. We've got some way to go to get past, outline-driven writing.
That it's another point that reminds me, and this is just a minor thing, but is there a reason why the reader in PDF view, I believe, that it can only go to a certain minimal view, which is pretty much 100%, or versus a sort of an auto shrinking, like if you wanted a couple of PDFs to be maybe that's the problem. Maybe it goes less than 100%.
We prefer to call it an insect. Some people call it a bug.
All right, very good.
That's not a feature.
Okay, that may be one thing that just on smaller screens, to be able to say, hey, I'm actually reading these two PDFs in my own haphazard way, and I just want to get them kind of side by side, or perhaps even smaller on the screen so I can write something.
Yeah, no, that's an annoying bug.
Okay, gotcha.
There are several. I'm not going to tell you what the rest are.
All right, fine. Very good.
But we started this conversation before Alan and Mark joined us with.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
No, that's okay. It happens. Jerry and I talked earlier about how these things can connect and how links can be the connection with these things. So maybe we can reflect in the future on how, the kind of graph view that I'm proposing here is super simple. But it doesn't mean that the same user won't have benefit from doing something much more sophisticated like trail marks, and how those things can then jump from one place to another.
I mean, the nice thing about the dynamic view, which sort of remind, in a sense, has an echo of Scapple and Tinderbox maps and things and Story Space before that, is actually the ability to have a sort of thinking space that isn't defined by lines. The problem is not the links, it's almost the other thing it does to us. It's a bit like starting at the top of the page and only going down, is that, you put a link on it, you're making a definitive statement. So now these two things are somehow more important than everything else on the screen, which doesn't have a link on it.
Yeah.
So it's really, this is one of the things I remember talking with, Fred, some way back when we were looking at early versions of author. And I mean, that's a really helpful thing. And the nice thing is you can blend it into a more formalized graph. And that helps in other ways. So if you go to something in the sense as comparatively sophisticated, say as Yuri's, tools, that's super. But there's also, I think at the very early stage, it's really useful to just have it's like tipping out a piece of a jigsaw, and you just shuffle them around, start making sense of them, just using associative grouping, so associative spatial grouping, whatever. While you're still finding your way, because at this point you're not actually trying to create the narrative. You're either sort of just assembling the parts, or you're ducking out of your narrative to write down another thing. I don't forget that. I don't know where it goes yet. It needs to be around. So it's assuredly more narrow than a completely wide system. But I think Fred's doing the right thing in terms of the focus here, which is getting people to that written endpoint. In this case, probably an undergraduate is probably, I think, the center target, whilst giving them actually much richer tools and less distraction. But it certainly is the ground sort of bedrock to something that much more sophisticated that could come out of it. Well, we've all thrown more money at him.
Love that, Mark. On that note, I actually, one of the things that I agree, and I love the minimalism that is obvious in the design, and it creates a sense of calm. It almost makes me, here's another, out there, not easy to do, but it almost makes me want, well, put it another way, graphs are great until they are too crazy. And it would be great to say, here's this document I'm working on. I've created these entities. Now this graph is getting out of hand. rather than destroying the graph, I want a focus view, right? Which is to say, maybe it's, I'll give you a few different versions. Either you start out with focused views where you have scoped graphs throughout your document that you can kind of jump through, or you have this basic graph that you're working on, but then you kind of draw a lasso around the parts that matter, and then give that lasso a title. And while you're in that view, every other part of the graph is gone. And so you could have multiple lassos, which would effectively be the same thing as scoped graphs, that could be entirely overlapping each other, but it's still the same part of the knowledge, the same graph, the same connected entities, but you get past that awful, that we've all experienced, that awful feeling, there's too much here, I can't make any more progress.
And so where I have to cut you off is on the word connected. In this, nothing is connected. All you're allowing yourself to do is to follow things that are the same, right? So when we had Doug Engelbart and Augment, there's no link anywhere or no connection at all, other than in the description, Doug Engelbart invented Augment.
I would still say that's connected because I was talking about it in the scalpel sense.
Yeah, it's an implicit connection in the Doug Engelbart sense. The reason I'm saying it, I don't think you are wrong, but all I'm saying is that if you were to delete Augment from the dynamic view, you will have lost nothing other than its location in the dynamic view. You can always just type the word in later.
Oh, yeah, right, okay, yeah.
That's
Sure,
why.
yeah, and that, I guess I was, that idea would apply to pretty much all graphs.
Yeah, but well, it's the.
But in your case, it's good to know that it doesn't go away.
What I mean is, if you delete Augment, you lose nothing but its location because it's a glossary term.
Yeah.
So when you add it again and do Command G, you will see all the same stuff.
That's fantastic. Right. That's good.
So
that's a strong distinction.
Yes. Having one of the things we definitely want to do is have different saved views. So you can do things, save it, but going into kind of Peter's world, at some point it would be really, really nice to be able to record views, maybe even as stepped editorials and have it later. So when you look at it in the far distant future, you can see how these connections changed for that author.
Definitely.
So, you know, by keeping it super, super simple, as close to pen and paper as we can, you know, and then just storing stuff. I mean, I'm a video and photography guy, so as far as I'm concerned, text documents are nothing. We can store huge amounts of data that can be useful sometime in the background.
That's great. And Raphael, I'm looking forward to, I believe that you demoed in the last talk. I want to take a look at that.
Yeah, it's on Frode's YouTube channel.
Fantastic.
The presentation.
Yeah, if you go to Circle and you go to monthly meetings, it should be easy to find there. We need to obviously try to keep polishing that.
Now with his hand up. If
What?
I'm pointing at the right person. Jerry's got Jerry's.
Yeah, Jerry.
Just it's very interesting. I've been following your work for there and the long time, future of text or even the unfinished revolution, and it's quite clear that the design of the underlining, the universal graph model, everything I built so that all those affordances could be supported. Because, you know, it may be that you don't have that link, but actually if you have the ability to have that link in that big global giant interpersonal graph, you should be able to take that view. You know, you should be able to, because it is at the moment, I suppose because it's a small little world, you basically do these searches, if you like, or whatever it is, on the fly. But actually those affordances are real. You do want to be able to see those things, and if you have a concept which supports that, then it can scale. Yeah,
Absolutely, Jerry. But here's the thing: there's this sentence, "Everything is connected," which is the most useful and useless sentence in the entire world, right?
I thought we were going to say everything costs money.
Yeah, everything costs money. So, you know, at core, my philosophy for everything I do comes down to the most basic fundamental thing in the universe is interaction. Without interaction, there is nothing, not even information, right? So if we're going to get the most utility out of our information, we have to apply the richest kind of interaction. And that means a delicate balance, at least that's how I feel from my own,
Absolutely.
of not over designing the tools.
No, I couldn't agree more. What I'm saying is that it is the case that eventually
Oh, I wasn't disagreeing
connects.
with you, Jerry.
But the point I'm trying to say, that actually it's not the interaction. Interaction is key, but the fundamental thing, if you have that level of abstraction, is attention itself. When I'm focusing on whatever it is, and you treat attention as sacred there, we precisely with this focus of not cluttering and whatever. But my looking at the telescope from the other end, when I said, yes, I want that attention focus. I want to treat attention sacred, but I also want to facilitate your attention changing the way you want to focus. So I want to enable all kinds of focusing, not just.
Talking of attention and focus, we're 15 minutes over.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Just,
Anyway, yes, Mark.
no, I'll do it. I'll send you text after. Honestly, it's some admin-y type stuff, so we can let you finish up.
Yeah, no, that's cool. No, I mean, it's great, this community. And of course, I'm very honored when we talk about the work that I happen to be doing, but I also think it's important we try to look into the interconnections. And of course, I think visual meta is one of them, but as Jerry has said many times, let's look more at links. And I remember sitting in Doug's office many, many years ago and saying, Doug, I just found out that a link at the end of it, if you put gibberish, the browser doesn't care. So that means you can encode everything in the link. That was a huge thing for both of us when we realized that, because in Doug's NLS augment system, you have view specs, of course. You could put a full view spec in a URL. And that changed how we did a lot of stuff. So, especially when Gunter comes back today, he had to leave a bit early. So the work Gunter and Jury are doing and what I'm trying to do, it would be really good to send back stuff, send it around stuff. We tried to do something for Doug demo a few years ago and it completely crashed. This is the problem with the leftist people. Rightist people get angry and do one thing. Leftist people tend to go all over the place. We're not good collaborators. We really suck at collaborating. So that's why hopefully we can find minimal ways of sending rich stuff between us, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Afraid I have to jump.
Yeah,
Been
good.
a pleasure.
I think the ship is going down. So
Oh, yeah, gotta get food ready.
bye for now.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.